Nigeria's gross domestic product (GDP) grows by 3.46% in third quarter 2024, up from 3.19% in second quarter 2024. Nigeria Export Processing Zones Authority NEVSA says linking new textile and garment special economic zone to generate 5,000 direct and 20,000 indirect jobs. Plus, oil studies amid possible Middle East ceasefire. Our guest on the program today is Kaka, the National Program Coordinator, Trade Network Initiative. The program is Business Express, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Nneka Oko. Nigeria's gross domestic product (GDP) grew by 3.46% in the third quarter 2024, up from 3.19% in second quarter 2024, as unemployment rate drops to 4.3% in second quarter. Musa Abubakar reports.
Data by the National Bureau of Statistics says that gross domestic product had reached 20.12 trillion naira in real terms. Growth was driven by the services sector, contributing 53.58% to GDP. Key contributors include crop production, 26.51%, trade, 14.78%, and telecommunication, 13.94%, with the non-oil sector accounting for 94.43% of GDP. The oil sector grew by 5.17%, with production at 1.47 million barrels per day. Meanwhile, unemployment rate dropped to 4.3% in second quarter 2024 from 5.3% in first quarter, according to the MBS. Labor force participation rose to 79.5%, with rural areas 83.2%, surpassing urban areas 77.2%. Youth unemployment, ages 15 to 34, was 6.5%. The highest wage employment fell to 14.4%, while informal employment increased to 93%. Time-related underemployment declined to 9.2%.
Thank you, Musa. We now turn our attention to the state of Nigerian economy with focus on latest GDP numbers, Monetary Policy Committee briefing coming up later in the day, and Finance Bill 2024. And joining me in the studio to give us perspective is the National Program Coordinator, Trade Network Initiative, Kaka. A pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you very much. Good morning, listeners.
Nigeria's GDP growth has accelerated to 3.46% in quarter 3 2024, up from 3.19% in quarter 2. What are your thoughts on this positive trend, and is it sustainable?
Okay, thank you. I think I also listened to your news. It's a good development, I must say, that the GDP has actually grown marginally. There are indications that there is hope. There's going to be light at the end of the tunnel for us, though it's actually going to be, it's crawling at the moment, but we're actually going to get there very soon. But having said that, is to also point out the fact that the gross domestic product itself, it's not the most appropriate economic index for assessing the development in country. They are good for doing cross-country analysis but domestically, it doesn't really give you the true projections of things because if you talk to an ordinary man on the street, he will tell you the GDP is growing, but the realities on ground are totally different things. So sometimes it is better we use a prosperity index, which is what most economies are actually moving towards, because it tells you the true picture of what is really happening with the citizens and what is happening in the market, as against the GDP figures that can also be a little bit misleading. Nonetheless, it's also a good development that we're actually making progress towards recovery in our country.
Okay, despite a slight rise in crude oil production, we saw that the oil sector underperformed in quarter 3 compared to quarter 2. What factors could be contributing to this decline?
Okay, first thing is I have a problem with that particular analysis, is to say, look, I know we produce oil here for the purpose of exporting sometimes to also generate forex for us, which is part of the reason why we're having issues with the devaluation of our currency, because we're not really exporting as much as we would. We also know that it also provides us with the necessary energy that we need in country. These two analysis now does not really suffice anymore. The refineries are not working. And so I'm wondering on what basis are you actually judging this assessment of the performance of the oil sector? And at what cost is it? Is it at the cost of the lives of Nigerians? I don't understand, because what everybody buys and pay for energy in the open market there, it's a little bit ridiculous for an oil producing and country that actually has 4 refineries that are in comatose at the moment. So I do not really understand the basis against which that analysis is done. Don't seem to be reckoning with it in the first instance, even though they said it has actually dropped.
All right, let's now turn our attention to MPC. The Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee briefing is happening today. With inflation still a challenge, what decisions do you expect the committee to make? Do you think they will hike interest rates again or maintain the current stance?
Okay, thank you. I think as at October, as at November 11th, interest rate, inflation was standing at about 33.88, and that might be one of the highest we've had so far. And to that extent, the Monetary Policy Committee, you don't expect them to do anything less but tighten the monetary policy rate. The last 2 meetings had it at MPR at 250%. It moved up. The last one was about 100. This last one that was actually held in September was about, the interest rate was moved by about 50% basis points. I am sure that is going to be higher for this particular month, this particular quarter, because inflation is still high. So we expect them to actually raise it and maintain liquidity. The last time as September, the cash reserve ratio for deposit money bank and merchant bank were actually different. That of the deposit money banks was actually raised higher to about 50%, and that of the deposit money bank from 14 to about 16. We expect them to maintain that, but definitely the MPR rate will have to go up, and the corridor around which it will go up might not be anything less than the plus 500 minus 100 it has at the moment right now, because that is the only way for which the central bank to actually go about trying to deal with the issues of rising inflation. But that being said, it must be understood that the period we are, there are periods where you have seasonal inflations, and this is the peak period, one of it right now, towards the ember months. And so the aggregate we have at the moment is also a function of not just what is going on, but one that is also accountable to the season we are. But having said that, the central bank would definitely want to tighten the monetary policy rate going forward, just to deal with rising inflation as we speak.
All right, we'll see how that goes. But then the windfall tax targets profits from foreign exchange revaluation. How significant are these profits, and why is this tax seen as necessary?
Okay, thank you. If I understand the question very well, and it's also in line with what the government is trying to do right now, the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Reforms and Tax itself is also doing something in that regard. They are also expecting that, look, we are now unifying the interest rate. Initially was to say, look, let us float the exchange rate, where you have a willing buyer, a willing seller. Parallel, the market will determine its rates. Central bank also will later realize and say, look, it is important we unify, because the parallel market, the BGCs, were actually offering rates which is much more better than what the official market, the NAFEM rate was actually offering them. So it was important they unify it so that you can reduce issues of speculations in the market and the round tripping that was actually going on within the foreign exchange market. I don't know how significant that particular figure is, but truth be told, it is important that that tax remain, because that is the only way you can, at the moment as we speak, seems to have a single exchange rate for Nigeria and be able to address issues about the devaluation of our country currency at the moment. Because speculation itself is also one of the major reasons, and the fact that the parallel market is giving a rate much more better than the official market rate is giving. So right now they have unified it. You heard again now that the central bank is telling the BDC to recapitalize, because it's bringing them into the informal sector and say, look, you are going to be an official dealer in the forex market. You are going to be providing for the retailers, while the NAFEM market will provide for other users of the forex. And so for me right now, it seems to be a good idea. How significant the figure is, I wouldn't be able to say, but I know it's a good move in the right direction for us as a country.
All right. Now let's talk about the current finance bill. How do you think it will affect Nigeria's business climate, particularly in terms of investor confidence and financial sector stability? Talking about the Finance Bill 2024.
Okay, the Finance Bill, which I understand is before the National Assembly now, has got a lot of provisions. But the summary of it, according to the chairman of that Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, Oyewole, is like, look, we're trying to see how businesses can actually move forward by reducing the tax burden on most of them. So what it has done right now is that it's still the same thing anyway. Company income tax has been reviewed, personal income tax, the same thing. And there are other kinds of new levies that have actually been placed. For instance, now, if you have an income aggregate for a year of about 800 and below, you are not expected to pay any income tax. For companies now, they are reviewing the company income tax burden. So the assessable profit of a company right now, the percentage you charge them for their company income tax has reduced. Currently, if you have between 25 and 40 million turnover, you are not expected to actually, you're expected to pay 20%. If you have higher than 100, you are supposed to pay 30%. While if you have less than 25 billion turnover, you are not expected to pay any tax. Now, what has happened is that going forward by that bill, your tax liability for companies is supposed to come down. For next year, it will be 27.5. Going forward beyond that, it will be 25%, which means as against paying 30% tax liability accessible on your profit, it will now be 25%.
So what should businesses and financial institutions do to adapt to the changes brought by the Finance Bill 2024?
A lot. One is, you obviously they need to reconfigure their system, because for every transaction you do now, there is a value-added tax being charged on you. So they see a financial service provision as not a necessity. But in the digital world that we are in, it's actually a necessity, because that is the only way where you can integrate yourself into the global economy, and also see how you can also begin to adapt to what is going on. Most people are going cashless. A lot of people are using the electronic devices to actually do their financial transactions. But one thing critical about the bill is that there is this electronic money transfer levy, which was before now anyway. The Financial Act 2023 also sustained it. Is to say that every time you withdraw you do a financial transaction more than 10,000 naira, you are supposed to pay 50 naira stamp, excise levy on them. That for a lot of people seems not to be going well, because at the moment you are taxing, you're collecting VAT on them. There's a maintenance fee on your account. There are so many other fees on individual accounts. And if you then add this particular one, the excise levy of this 50 naira, it looks insignificant upon every single transaction more than 10,000 naira. So if I do like 20 of them or 10 of them a day, you can imagine what those small 50 naira will aggregate. For us, we expect the financial service provider to adapt to it, but for the ordinary citizen on the street, it's another burden one too many on being able to actually leverage the services of the financial institution to do your businesses and then sustain a living. So it might not really be that something welcome, but these are some of the changes that the financial service sector is expected to do. Apart from the fact that they're also saying now, look, there's also an excise duty on foreign exchange transactions. If you sell above the official exchange rate, you are supposed to return the excess of it as excise levy to the government and that is actually targeting the BDC, because the official market will definitely not sell beyond what is the official approved rate. So these are some of the issues in the financial bills that are actually going to be a major issue to the financial service sector. But for the businesses, they've also got their own challenges to deal with in the new bill coming up.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chris Kaka, National Program Coordinator, Trade Network Initiative. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.